Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Annie, this is Stanley, and we're here to talk about books. For today's video, we're going to go through all of the books that I finished in August. But first of all, let's make some tea. So, what do the tea dice have in store today? 9 and 4 is 13. So that is... Ooh, Genmaicha. Haven't had this in a while. Excellent. This is sometimes called popcorn tea. Got little bits of popped rice, brown rice tea. It's quite earthy flavour, but yeah, it's nice to have every now and then. Good old past me has already boiled the kettle. Remembered that I don't need an infuser tray in this teapot, which is good because I don't have one that fits. Looks quite fun with all of the popcorny bits. They will expand and stop them from coming out of the spout. Anyway, there you go. Genmaicha. So now that we've got our tea, we can talk about August reading. So this was an interesting month for me because I am doing the HRCYED 2.0, hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. And one of the squares to fulfill is playing someone else's TBR game and using that to pick your books for one of the months. And I did that for August, so I'm going to be able to tick off an entire square on the bingo board, which is quite exciting. So I ended up with quite a few books on the pile, and this is actually going to be the first month so far in my BookTube journey where I haven't ended up reading the books that I said I was going to read. I did do most of them, and I swapped a couple out and replace them with other ones for various reasons, which I'll come to when we get there. So the first book that I finished in August was The Sword Defiant by Gareth Ryder Hanrahan, which is the first in a fantasy trilogy, but it's interesting because it's set 20 years after the good guys have defeated the evil power that was wreaking havoc across the world. And it's about what's happened since, where they all are now, how they have adjusted to kind of being in charge because they were put on the council of the city that they freed from the evil force. And yeah, so it's kind of about economics and governance and societal inequality, because there are some of the evil guys' minions still roaming around and they are kind of second-class citizens. And yes, the heroes aren't necessarily all that suited to being in charge, and there are ructions within them, within their group, and various other things happening as well. So I started off quite liking it. It was quite light in tone, although there were quite some heavy themes as well. I enjoyed the main hero's sister's narrative thread probably more than any of the others. I really liked her son finds out near the beginning of the book that he is the nephew of this great hero that she hasn't told him, and he goes off in search of his uncle to try and find adventure, and she sets out to try and bring him home and gets embroiled in various things. But it just kind of started getting a bit dreary partway through, and the humour kind of disappeared, and Alf, who is the main protagonist and the keeper of the evil sword, which is sentient and quite snarky, and was definitely my favourite character. But Alf kind of gets a bit beaten down by the disappointments in his life and things not turning out how he wanted them to be. I did finish it, and I'm glad I finished it, and because often when I'm struggling a little bit with the first in a series, I just give up because I think if I'm not going to finish the trilogy, what's the point of putting myself through it? But it never got to that point. I did enjoy it overall, but it felt like it could easily be a standalone, so that was quite nice. It kind of rounded itself off in a good way. So I'm quite happy about not carrying on with the series, but I have given it 3.5 stars overall. Mostly for the snarky sword. And that was going to be starting to fulfill the trilogy in the series Staircase of HRCYED 2.0, but I'm not going to carry on, so I can't use it for that. So I used it for becoming the avatar, where you either have to do titles with the different elements in or covers that represent the different elements. And I'm doing both because why not make life more complicated? And there are clouds on the cover of the Sword Defiance, so I'm using it for the air for that. It wasn't part of the TBR game, and I can't remember off the top of my head which other prompt it was that I used it for, but I will stick it up here somewhere to let you know. After that, I went on to The Old Wives' Tale by Arnold Bennett, which was from the TBR Spinner Wheel, gave me Classic, and this was the only classic on my shelves, bit chunky. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'd never heard of it, and apparently there's masses of them. It's a bit like the Barchester Chronicles. There's like 15 or 16 of them. It's not quite that many, but quite a few. And this is about two sisters in the late 1800s into the early 1900s who their father is a draper in a small town in the Midlands, and one of them gets married and takes over the shop, and the other one elopes with a travelling salesman, oh the scandal, and disappears off to Paris. And the narrative is split, and you get several hundred pages of the one who stayed in England, and then you get several hundred pages of the one who went to Paris, which was a little bit odd. And then eventually they come back together at the end. And I really enjoyed this book. It was very immersive, very involving. I nearly DNF'd it in the first couple of pages because the prose was almost incomprehensible, and it was just sort of setting out the geography of the town, and it wasn't really very interesting. But it got a lot better and a lot easier to read as it went along, and I'm very glad that I persevered. It was going to fulfill the 600s pages for the by the hundreds prompt for HRCYED, but it turned out that it started on page 37, so it only actually had about 580 pages, which was really annoying. So I had to take it off that, but I've used it for the Around the World challenge for a European setting, because half of it is set in France, even though, I mean, I guess the UK is still geographically part of the continent of Europe, even though we're not in the EU anymore. But anyway, let's not get into that. France definitely counts as Europe, so I've used it for that. And again, completely forgotten the other one, but I will stick it up here. So I gave this 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. After that, I went on to None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, which fulfilled the TBR game spinner prompt of an author new to me, and which is also, see, I'm really terrible at remembering. This is fulfilling the is from my quote, "Fear is the price of our instrument," which is one of the HRCYED prompts. You have to pick a quote and then pick a book for each word in the quote. So none of this is true. Fear is the price of our instrument. So that's fulfilling that. And again, can't remember the second one, so I'll stick it up here. This is a thriller, kind of a psychological thriller, a bit of a mystery. It's about 2 women who meet and discover that they have exactly the same birthday and were born in the same hospital. One of them's a podcaster, and she ends up interviewing the other one about her life, because the other one says she's planning on making some changes in her life, and has lots of interesting things to say. But then you get it from the title. It's very difficult to tell what's true, what's not. It's cleverly done because you do get both their perspectives, and it's often very difficult to do a perspective well of someone who is obscuring things, hiding things, or lying about things to the reader as well as to other people in the book. And this is done very well in this. I often have problems with thrillers where I just want to find out what happens and I end up skimming. That didn't happen here because the writing was very good and I was engaged by the story as a whole, so that was excellent. And then I often also have problems with the ending. I'm either overwhelmed by an ending that's too over the top, or underwhelmed by an ending that doesn't fulfill the promise of the tension build up. And this, I think, actually worked out really well. it's not just that the one character is telling lies. It's kept quite obscured even right up till the end. And I'm not entirely certain she necessarily always knows what's true. And some of the other characters might also be lying about stuff. So yeah, there was a lot going on, and I enjoyed this, and I gave it 4 stars. I also listened to A Pirate's Life for Tea by Rebecca Thorne, which is the next in the Tea and Tomes series by that author. And I read Can't Spell Treason Without Tea last year and really enjoyed it. So I was looking forward to getting into this one. This was fulfilling the secret prompt for HRCYED in August, which was to read a book with a pun in the title. So that was my pick for that. And it was also the blue cover, I think. Yes, the blue cover for the HRCYED prompts. But I was a bit disappointed in this one overall. I initially quite enjoyed being back with these characters and in this world. I like the 2 protagonists, Raina and Kianth. I liked the fact in the first one that their romantic relationship was already established before the series started. So there's a lot of good banter, there's a lot of good relationship stuff, but it's not them falling in love because that's already happened. So I liked that. But I really liked in the first one the town that they went to and their shop that they opened. It was a bookshop and a tea shop, which is just perfect for me, and all of the other characters in the town. And in this one, they're not in the town, they're somewhere else. And the new characters that were introduced and the actual storyline, I wasn't actually that invested in. And I found myself kind of sliding off it when I was listening to it and not really wanting to get back to it when I was away doing other stuff. So it wasn't a massive success for me. I'm afraid I'm giving it 2.5 stars. Next up was The Lions of Al Rassan by Guy Gavriel Kay. Now, I would have said in the early 2000s that Guy Gavriel Kay was probably one of my all-time favourite writers. His Fionnavar Tapestry was very impactful for me in my very late teens, in the late 90s. And I absolutely love the Sarantium duology, and I'm pretty sure that that would still hold up. I've read it more than once. I'm not sure about the Fionnavar Tapestry. I'm not sure whether that would stand the test of time. But Tori from Tori Talks, one of the other BookTube channels that I follow, decided she was going to do a read-along, a buddy read of this with the people on her Discord. And I thought, I don't think I've read this one. And I decided I'd give it a go because it's nice to be in a community and sharing books with other people. So I am using this to fulfill the Magical Readathon Adventures in Eldia map prompt of a book with stars on the cover, because it does have stars on the cover in those little blue bits. You can just about see that. I was originally going to use The Humans by Matt Haig for this, but the read along came along and I wanted to do it, and I thought I'll swap it out. So I'm not reading The Humans this month after all. This was one of the weirdest reading experiences I think I've ever had. It took me a little while to get into it. Classic, overblown 90s fantasy prose. But the world building is good if there's maybe a little bit too much exposition to begin with. There's a lot of characters, a lot of fairly similar names, which can be a little bit tricky. Really enjoyed all of the female characters. Very varied, very layered, complex characters. A lot of flaws, but in a good way. Very likable, most of them, very different. Really enjoyed that. So I was impressed by a male author writing women really well. But some of the sexual politics made me really uncomfortable. Some of the ways in which the women were using sex to manipulate the male characters I wasn't entirely sure about. A handful of really quite grim incidents, very gory. A lot of bad things happening to horses. I mean, yes, horses in battles where people are mounted are not going to have a good time of it. But I think most authors would kind of skate over that. Whereas this, it felt like the horses were a bit of a focus in terms of really horrible things happening to them. And so I didn't really enjoy that. So I would say that I kind of swung back and forth chapter by chapter between really enjoying this and wanting to DNF it, which was a weird experience. And I found it very difficult to decide how to rate this book, because it had aspects of it ranged from 0 stars all the way up to 5 stars, and it was fairly evenly spread across. So I think I'm going to have to give it 2.5, but that feels a bit weird. So yeah, I wasn't overly keen. So yes, very, very weird. Again, I can't remember which prompts. I'm using this for the 500 to 599 pages for HRCYED, and probably also something else, which again I have forgotten. So I will stick it up here. Yeah. So I have also sadly DNF'd an audiobook called The Veiler, which I came across recently and was quite excited by, because it was a serialized audiobook on Spotify originally, I think, and it was co-written by no, can't remember, Rivers Solomon, S.L. Huang, Becky Chambers, and someone else. All female sci-fi writers, I believe, and I love Becky Chambers, and so I was quite excited to listen to this, but it didn't do it for me. It's a science fiction book, and it's about a mercenary who is tasked by the planetary administrator where she lives to go on a mission to find a missing spaceship which is full of refugees from a planet whose star is dying. And the person who goes along with her on the mission is the planetary administrator's son, who is supposed to be sort of getting some life experience going on the mission, but also kind of spying on the mercenary and reporting back to their father about what's going on. It sets its stall out quite early, a lot of very heavy themes laid out in the opening chapter to do with immigration, environmental collapse, racism, insensitivity to cultures other than your own, all this kind of stuff going on. And it's all quite bluntly laid out as this is what the themes are going to be of this book. And I didn't really connect to the characters, and a bit like with the Pirate's Life for Tea, I was listening to it and my brain was just kind of like sliding off the story. And again, I wasn't like looking forward to getting back to it. And I need a good audiobook to get me out and walking and getting exercise, and doing the laundry. So I had to DNF it around the 25% mark, which is a shame, because you can't use your points you've earned in HRCYED to counter DNF unless you get over halfway through. And I decided I didn't want to slog it out for that long. So that was a bit of a shame. So I'm having to replace that in the HRCYED spreadsheet. I am sorry if you can hear the construction outside. It's been going on all day, so I hope it doesn't come across too badly and that it's not too annoying. But yes, that's it for now. I have many more books to read in the month, and I will come back when I have read some more to let you know my thoughts. So I am back with some more book reviews, and I have to say my August TBR has gone completely rogue. If you watched my TBR video for my plans of what I was going to read in August, the actual books that I've ended up reading have been quite different. But, you know, that's sometimes the way it goes, especially when I'm trying to fulfill prompts for reading challenges. So the next book that I started reading was The 3-Year Swim Club by Julie Checkaway, which was part of my TBR game spin a wheel that I did for the August TBR, and it was going to be one of my non-fiction HRCYED books and also the representation on the spinner wheel. And unfortunately, this one didn't really work out for me. It's about a journalist who decided to investigate a story about a teacher in Maui in the 1930s who decided to put together a swimming team and train them for the Olympic Games. And he made up his team from Japanese American kids of sugar plantation workers in the 1930s on Maui. I thought it sounded reasonably interesting. It was part of a mystery book box that someone gave me for Christmas last year. So it's been on the shelf for a while, didn't really want to pick it up. And the preface was really interesting. The voice of the author was very engaging, and she introduced the story in a really good way, and I was more invested than I thought I was going to be. But then once it got to the main section and it was starting to go through the history of the people involved and the different types of people on the island and the history of Hawaii and all of this, it just started really dragging and it just didn't hold my interest, unfortunately. So I decided to DNF it, which means that I needed to find a different book to fulfill the representation spin from the TBR game, because that's not something that I could go back and abandon or change. So we'll come to that a bit later. Next, I read Home Truths by Susan Lewis, which I was quite looking forward to because I've tried a few others of hers. I really enjoyed Losing You. Wasn't so keen on I Know It's You, which I read. She seems to, of the two that I've read, one of them was a very heartfelt, emotive family drama, and the other one was a completely ridiculous, over-the-top thriller. So I wasn't sure where this was going to land, and it was kind of somewhere in the middle. So it's about a mother whose husband is killed, and her son, who's been involved with drugs and gangs in London, disappears. And then she's left trying to hold her family together because she's got two other younger children. And the finances of the family start unraveling because she's lost her husband's income. And there's issues with her landlord and her work history and all of that kind of stuff. So it feels like it's a very well portrayed depiction of someone whose finances are causing problems and how that leads to more and more problems because she gets more and more into debt and she finds it harder and harder to sort things out and get on top of it all. And that feels like, very easy to see how that could happen. So that's very frightening because, everybody has the potential to suffer a tragedy, which is obviously terrible in and of itself, and the repercussions of that might end up being quite devastating. But it did mean that because the sort of first half of the book was just over and over more and more problems to do with the finances and her trying to find work and keep her family together and keep her house, it's pretty relentlessly depressing. And then the second half, things definitely start looking up. But it felt as if it was a bit Deus Ex Machina in terms of how things started to come back together for her. And also that there were other people who were doing all of the stuff that was helping her out, and she wasn't really contributing that much or didn't really have that much agency, which I suppose to a certain extent is realistic. But it just felt as if she wasn't really doing all that much to sort out the problems. And also that there wasn't really any hope or any advice, well, not really advice, but any kind of direction for anybody who might really be in this situation, because how she ends up getting out of it is completely unrealistic and would be very unlikely to happen to anyone else. So yeah, wasn't so keen. Also, it felt like neither of the parts of the storyline, the thing to do with her missing son and all of the stuff to do with her financial situation, didn't really get a proper climax. It all just kind of fizzled out or got resolved in a very easy fashion. So, I was engaged all the way through. I've given it 4 stars. It was one of the TBR games spinners for a recent purchase. That was it. And it's also fulfilling one of the years in the last 10 years for the HRCYED challenge. So 3 stars for Susan Lewis. I will keep reading hers if I come across them, but I'm not quite as enthused as I was after the first one of hers I read. So after that, I finished another audiobook, and I'd been struggling a little bit with my audiobook listening this month. So I went to a series that I have read some of before, which is the Bobiverse series by Dennis Taylor. But in a weird series of events, I had read the second and third in the series, but not the first one, because I was on a car journey with Dave once a long time ago, and he was listening to the book, and we put it on in the car. So I heard sort of bits and pieces of it, or a section in the middle, and then he told me the rest of the story, and I thought it sounded really interesting. So I started the series with book 2. And I thought I'd quite like to read this again, because there are a couple more books in the series, 4 and 5, that I haven't read yet. And I'd never read the first one, so I thought I'll start the series and listen through. It's a very good narrator. It was a bit confusing because the premise of the book is that a man called Bob, he pays to have his body frozen when he dies, in the hopes that in the future he might be resuscitated in some way, and then pretty much immediately dies. And then it jumps 130 years, I think, into the future, and he is brought back to life as kind of a digital version of himself, which is then transplanted into a deep space probe, and he's sent out to look for viable planets for colonies from Earth. And interestingly, the narrator of the book is the same person who narrates Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which I listened to earlier in the year. And because of some of the similarities between what happens at the beginning of both of those books, I got a little bit confused, because it was very similar and it was the same audio narrator. And he's a very good audio narrator. It's one of the reasons I wanted to listen to this again, because, as I said, I was having a bit of trouble with my audio listening for some reason. And this was a very easy book to listen to. It's fun. It's interesting. There's a little bit maybe too much techno babble in there, but towards the second half, when he starts replicating himself and you get lots more Bobs, who do give themselves different names, but they are all versions of him, it gets a lot more interesting, a lot more dynamic, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to moving forwards in the series and listening to the 2 I've read before, and then moving on to the ones I haven't. Anyway, so this is doing the subgenres square for HRCYED. I'm assigning it to space opera, and I also used it for the yellow cover in the cover rainbow. I mean, I know it's not wholly yellow, but I think it's roughly 50%, so I'm going with that. So that was good. And then I attempted to replace the 3-Year Swim Club in the representation category from the TBR spinner wheel with The Architect's Apprentice by Elif Shafak. I was a little bit apprehensive going into this one because I didn't enjoy the other book of hers that I read, 3 Daughters of Eve, but I found this in a charity shop, and the cover is so pretty. It's such a lovely book, and it sounded quite interesting. It's about a young boy who travels from India to Constantinople in the 16th century with an elephant, who is a gift from the Shah of India to the Sultan in Constantinople. And it's about his relationship with the elephant and how he finds his place in the court and the various things that happen to them. But it was really grim, very violent, lots of death, lots of threat to the boy and the elephant. The elephant doesn't have a very good time of it, unfortunately. And whilst I was kind of vaguely interested as I was reading through it, I was sort of really struggling to get into it. And then when they were sent off to war, I just decided I didn't want to follow them to war to see what happened to them fighting. So unfortunately, the representation pick for the TBR game spinner wheel is not having a good time, because unfortunately I DNF'd this one as well. Such a shame, because I wanted to love it and put it on the shelf because it's so pretty. So to replace the representation category again, and also to start off a different square on the HRCYED bingo board, I picked The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater, which is a recent release. There is a square on the HRCYED board which is new releases, where you're supposed to pick a book which is released in each month of the year of the challenge, and then read it, either if you manage to get an advanced reading copy in the 2 months before it comes out, or the 2 months after it comes out. I originally wasn't going to do this square because I thought I don't really want to be buying new books. I don't tend to read all that many new books. But then I decided, completionist me, I thought I would go for it, and I was leaving it a little bit late. I started the challenge in June, so I'm starting the new releases in June, which meant that I had to read a book released in June before the end of August. And so The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater turned out to be that book. I love Maggie Stiefvater. I think I've loved all of the books of hers that I've read to a greater or lesser extent. So I was quite excited about this one. And it's a book set in the Second World War, just after Pearl Harbor. And it's about a hotel in the Appalachians where various German and Japanese diplomats are sent to be watched by the FBI during that period, while they decide what they're going to do with them and where they're eventually going to end up. It fulfills the representation because there is a viewpoint character called Hannelore who is autistic and mute. So it did manage to finally fulfill the representation pick from the TBR game. And I don't know, I found it really difficult to kind of get hold of it somehow. It felt like very little actually happened. I know that's something, not really something sensible to say about a book, because obviously things happened. It was, 400 pages. But it just didn't feel like it really went anywhere. And I really liked June, who is the general manager of the hotel. I thought she was portrayed very well, all of the stuff to do with both class and gender distinctions that made her job difficult, and the various relationships that she forged with the staff and the owners of the hotel and the people who were staying there was all really good. But it felt like not enough time was dedicated to any of the relationships for them to really feel like something I could invest in and feel connected to. There was some interesting sort of mysteries going on. There was a sort of a supernatural aspect, but really wasn't developed very well, and I didn't really understand it. So yeah, it wasn't, I finished it and I did enjoy it overall, and bits of it were very affecting, but it was just a bit nothingy, which feels a bit harsh to say. So I'm going to give it 3.5 stars because it was still well written, and I do like Maggie Stiefvater, but yeah, a little bit of a disappointment. So after that, I moved on to A Murder of Clones by Christine Catherine Ruche, which is number 10 in the Retrieval Artist series. This is part of a sub-series within that universe. So I have read quite a lot of these books in the past, but the last one was over 18 months ago, so it took me a little while to get back into it. I wasn't originally planning to allocate this to one of the TBR spinner wheel categories. I was just going to read it anyway as part of my Reddit Fantasy Bingo challenge, because this is the hidden gem category for that, which is to read a book which has, I think, fewer than 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. And yeah, unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be a particularly popular series, which is a shame because I love it. I think it's great. But I realised that it would fulfil the TBR spinner wheel of TBR Veteran, because it has been on the shelf for a long time, because it has been nearly 2 years since I read the last one. So it's been hanging around since then. What I love about these books is that they're set in the future, they're science fiction, and they're about a future where Earth has made contact with quite a lot of alien species, and the books are all about the legal systems of the different cultures and how they intersect, and how humans get into trouble when they break laws on alien worlds that they were perhaps unaware of. And I think it's probably the best series I've read where it actually portrays alien cultures as really, really alien. So the aliens in terms of their physicality and their attitudes to things and what they feel is important, and how the humans interact with them, I think is probably the most, if it can be realistic with alien species, most realistic in terms of the aliens really being aliens. So there's a lot of language issues, there's a lot of legal issues, and I really enjoy the series. It took me a little while to get into this because I didn't remember some of the details, but I did remember quite a lot. This one's a bit weird though, because none of the characters from the previous 9 books are actually in it. It's a whole new set of characters, which took me a little while to connect to. It feels like a bit of a side quest in a way, from events that have happened in the main series, and there's other people sort of investigating what's going on. There's been a terrorist attack on the moon, and there's an agent who deals with problems with humans interacting with aliens out on the frontiers, and there's also a lawyer who gets involved in part of the aftermath of the attack on the moon. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm giving it 4 stars. I'm looking forward to carrying on with the series at some point, and so this is fulfilling the TBR game for TBR veteran, and also the subgenres because it's crime, sci-fi crime. So that's helping out with that. So then, did I have any other audiobooks? No, I've done the audiobooks. So the last book that I read was another one which wasn't on the original TBR, but the TBR spinner wheel gave me new author, and I was also given this book by a friend of mine, Richard, who was actually in my previous wrap-up video with a guest review to do with a little agreement we made about reading difficult books. And he gave me this book, which is called Meditations from Mortals by Oliver Berkman. And I decided I wanted to read it throughout August. It's got 28 short chapters, and the idea is that you read one each day and then reflect on certain aspects of it. So this was a new author to me, so it's replacing the Let Them theory, which I had originally picked to fulfill that square. And it's also replacing that book in the non-fiction category for HRCYED. And it says very much it's not a self-help book. It doesn't have like exercises to do. It's not trying to give you sort of tasks and lifestyle stuff, but it is, to a certain extent, it's kind of meditative, as you know from the title, reflective, and it's about acknowledging the limits of human experience and getting that to galvanize you to spend your time more intentionally on the things that are important to you, rather than getting bogged down with continually trying to get on top of things or get through your to-do list or clear certain things out of the way, so that you will then reach a mythical point in the future where you have the time and space to dedicate to the bigger projects that you want to work on. So it treads a fine line, and it has to make quite a lot of interesting distinctions between things, and he spends quite a lot of the book saying, I am not saying that acknowledging your limitations means that you shouldn't be following your dreams or having ambitions and that kind of thing. But he has to do quite a lot of work to keep reiterating that message. But this kind of came to me at exactly the right moment in my life, because I have been sort of questioning what my goals are, particularly to do with my writing. I'm taking a break from writing novels at the moment, and I've kind of closed down my blogs and my newsletters, and I'm certainly not stopping the YouTube channel, because I'm absolutely loving that. So I'm focusing on that instead, because that's what's important to me at the moment, my reading and the YouTube videos. So it was really interesting. There was a lot in here that I have come across before, but it's always useful to have those lessons be reiterated and learn them again and be reminded of them. So I read a chapter every day and then wrote a page in my journal about my thoughts for each chapter. So there were very few of them that were really revelatory, but there were a couple of chapters along the way which I actually thought, oh yeah, that's really interesting, that's really helpful, that's gonna stay with me, which is kind of the point of the book. So I would definitely recommend this if you are struggling with overwhelm, if you always feel like you have too much to do and you never get the time to work on the things that are really important to you. I mean, obviously it does acknowledge that there are a lot of obligations in life that you can't just escape from and relinquish. But I think it has a lot of interesting and useful things to say. So I'm giving this 4 stars. So that was my pile of books for August. As I said, the TBR got a bit out of hand. I had to replace a few because I had a few DNFs, unfortunately. Sorry, Stanley. I don't know where I can put that where it's not going to be in the way. There you go. So yes, and there were the audiobooks that I also listened to. So yeah, it was a pretty good reading month. Did have a few duds, but managed to replace them. So I've completed the HRCYED TBR game Square by fulfilling all of the prompts that I spun on Cody's spinner wheel. So there you go. September's going to be interesting because it's Magical Readathon Autumn Equinox, and I've also got some other challenges to try and crowbar in to the TBR, so we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, I hope you're having an excellent time with your reading. If you have read any of the books that I read in August, do let me know, and let me know what you thought of them. Otherwise, just give me a stack of books emoji, because that's always relevant. And just do leave a comment and do like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will look forward to seeing you again in another video very soon. Bye for now.